Chris, I mean, it's one thing to be called to nursing, and it's another thing to take on the responsibilities of leadership in nursing. And I know you spent a lot of your career helping not only be a leader, but also helping other nurses as they make that leap, have the right skill set to take that on. What are you seeing about people who are new to leadership in this crisis? What are you seeing among people who've been leaders for a long time in this crisis?
What I'm seeing in my new leaders is utter burnout. They don't know. They weren't prepared to have the hard conversation. So they have staff that are lashing out, right? And for just reason, these staff are confused, they're scared. And so what I found in some of my newer leaders is that they, instead of helping manage the fear and the anxiety, they contributed to it. So, for example, like, we were talking about how we were testing exposures, and one of the leaders that I had said, you guys aren't doing that. And we were doing that, but she had her own fear, her own model. And so it was really like bringing them back and saying, guys, as a leader, our job is really to support them and to help manage anxiety, not to contribute to it. And if you're feeling anxiety, we need to step aside and as a leadership team, talk about why we feel that way. So I think one thing that I see in them is that they just nobody's had this experience, right? And it hasn't happened in our lifetime. So I think that they haven't had this level of stress for this long a period of time. And so I'm seeing burnout, and they feel like they have to be brave. Like for my team, I told them, you don't have an option, you have to take time off. It's not an option. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And my expectation is that you take time off, or I'm gonna tell you what days you're gonna take off. And they didn't want to, right? They wanted to be brave, they wanted to be there, they wanted to be in the team. And I said, no guys, we just have to have deputies. We're going to have partners, and our partner will be our backup so that we can get some respite because we're burning out. So I think in terms of my leaders, that's one thing that I saw in some of our early leaders. And I think in hindsight, I should have really set up that structure for respite early. I think I should have taken my own advice because they were seeing me. I think I did like a 52-day stint with no days off. And so I should have set a better example for them in terms of what I expect them to be doing, because they were like, well, you're working weekends. And so I was like, yeah, but I have to. And they're like, well, I have to too. And then the second question, you said, what was the second question about that?
More veteran leaders, people who may have been in the trenches for a long time, how did this catch them differently than, say, somebody who's just newly in the role?
Yeah, so for my veteran leaders, I think it was even worse, because I think they felt like they had to, like they couldn't leave. So not only were they working, I mean, I had a couple of days of luxury where I was able to work remote on the weekends a couple of days, and they would still come in. And so I think it was even harder for them to face the fact that they need respite too, for the veteran leaders that I have, because everybody was coming to them for the solutions. And so I think for them, it was even harder to help. For them, it was more of like, for my newer leaders, they were kind of siding with our staff, and really the anxiety was ramping up. And then for my veteran leaders, they, instead of like being able to express vulnerability, they just put on their armor, and they were like not expressing vulnerability in any way, shape, or form, because they felt like it was a weakness. And it wasn't a weakness, right? It wasn't. I mean, these people have families that they weren't seeing, and so I think for them, I think they felt like they were the captains, and they were gonna go down with their ship. And so I think it was actually harder, to be honest, for my veteran leaders than it was for my newer leaders, because I feel like they felt like they had to carry the entire ship by themselves.
So talk to me a little bit about the impact on personal life, right? I mean, you're a leader at work, you're a leader at home, you're a leader in a lot of different places. How did those lines blur, shift, get very rigid?
I think probably for myself and the rest of the executive leadership team, I think early on, everything except what was happening in the hospital took a back seat. Our families took a back seat. Some of us teach and do things outside of our executive roles, and everything. For me, I have a podcast and business, and I completely stopped recording. And so I think everything took a back seat. And I think it wasn't until probably about 4 weeks in that, I came to the table and I said, guys, my kids are failing school right now. Like, they're failing. They're out of school. They don't have they're literally, it's like the Lord of the Flies at my house. These kids are like running abandoned on a ship at home by themselves. Nobody's doing homework. I'm not there to do any homework with them. My husband also works at a hospital, so same thing. And another mom stood up and she said, I haven't seen my son in like whatever amount of time. I don't remember what it was. And she's like, I feel like I should win the worst mother of the year award. And literally the entire exec team that had kids at home stood up and said the same thing. And I think we realized at that moment, we hadn't gotten our priorities where they needed to be. And so that's when we as a team said, okay, no, we're assigning deputies as of this week. What 2 days are you taking off? And so every single week we're asking each other, what day are you taking off? What are you going to be doing to respite? We have to report out like what we did. Oh, I went for a walk, or I took because we all really, I think 100% of us put our families on a backseat. And that was the worst thing we could have done, because for those of us with young kids, I mean, they're struggling. My kids are all expressing symptoms of depression right now. I have one that's supposed to be graduating high school, and she's not having any of the graduation activities. She's struggling. I have, a 9-year-old that is, is typically in soccer and Little League and all this, has all this contact with the kids, and he hasn't seen another child other than his siblings for now, going on 2.5 months. So I think because of that, we weren't our best at work because of what we were leaving behind in terms of our personal lives. And it showed. We were all super snappy with each other. We had to call each other out a couple of times, like, hey, you need to go take some rest because, you're not showing up as your best self today.